My husband moved cross-country, and I cared for my mother-in-law after her stroke. On her deathbed, she grabbed my hand and entrusted me with land worth $4 million. Don't you let him know. 3 days later, the truth left me speechless. I'm Emily, 28 years old. I got married at 20, and for 8 years, I've been a daughter-in-law in the Miller family. My husband is Michael, 32. Our son, Leo, is 7 now. He's at that age where he constantly asks, "Mom, why isn't Dad coming home to us?" My mother-in-law is Carol Miller, 59. She used to be the vibrant owner of a corner convenience store, always with a quick smile and a brisk step. But now, she just lies here, her body as thin and frail as a dry twig. I left Leo with our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gable, for the night. He fell asleep early, still clutching his father's old t-shirt, as if hugging it tightly enough would somehow bring his dad home. Mrs. Gable texted me, "Don't you worry about your mother. I've got the little one. Be careful on the road. It's raining." Reading the message, I felt a pang of gratitude and sorrow. There are moments in a woman's life when you just want someone to lean on. But when you look around, you realize you have to be your own pillar. The chill in the county hospital at night is a different kind of cold. It seeps up from the linoleum floors and settles in your chest. The smell of antiseptic mingles with the scent of medication from the next room, making every breath feel heavy. Above the bed, the heart monitor beeps in a steady, relentless rhythm. Beep, 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 like a clock ticking against my own heart. I glanced at the name on the patient chart. Carol Miller, 1,967, and my vision blurred. A whole lifetime of hard work, and in her final decline, the only sound she heard was the hum of a machine instead of the voices of her son and grandson. I sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand, which was cool and dry. Her skin was thin, the veins standing out like the branches of a winter tree. Carol was lying on her side, and though her eyes were clouded, she tried to focus on me. "Emily," she called, her voice a raspy whisper, like wind through dry leaves. "Yes, Mom. I'm right here," I replied, leaning in close. Ever since she got sick, I'd learned to speak softly, afraid that any extra effort might exhaust her further. I adjusted her blanket and rubbed my palms together to warm them before placing them on the back of her hand. It was just a small bit of warmth, but it was all I had to give. The door creaked open, and the night nurse came in. She drew the privacy curtain partway and said, "Just try to keep her calm. She's very weak. I'll get the doctor if anything changes." She left, leaving a trail of rubbing alcohol scent behind her. I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. I glanced at my phone. A message from Michael had appeared. Just 3 words, "I'm swamped." Not a single question about how his mother was doing, or if I had eaten. Just that. I remembered earlier that afternoon, before I brought Mom to the hospital, I had called him 3 times. The first call went to voicemail. The second, he answered with annoyance in his voice. "I'm in a meeting." I told him Mom was having trouble breathing, but all he said was, "Oh, okay," before hanging up. The third call, he didn't answer at all. I sent a text. "Mom is in bad shape. Can you come home?" I saw the delivered receipt, but there was no reply. Outside, the rain slicked the window panes. Inside the room, the beep, beep, continued its merciless count. They say a leaf falls back to its roots, but why did this tree have to rely on a daughter-in-law to watch over its every last breath? Suddenly, Carol stirred, and her fingers tightened around my wrist. It was a weak grasp, but it startled me. "Mom, are you in pain?" I asked, my voice trembling. She shook her head slowly, her lips parted and closed as if she wanted to say something but lacked the air. I offered her some water with a sponge, but she refused with another slight shake of her head. Memories flooded back. When I was a newlywed, we didn't have much, but there was always something simmering on the stove. Carol used to say, "We may not be rich in money, but we have to be rich in love." She would give me the best cut of the roast, taking the tougher parts for herself. I'd feel embarrassed, but she would just laugh and say, "You're young. You need to eat to build your strength." I believed back then that if I just persevered, everything would work out. But some oceans aren't made by the sky, but by the human heart. There's an old saying, "You reap what you sow." I was terrified that Leo would be the one to suffer for the mistakes of his elders. Carol's grip on my hand suddenly became firm. It wasn't weak anymore. It felt like a final, urgent plea. I looked at her, and she met my gaze, her eyes surprisingly deep and clear. "Listen to me, child," she whispered, each word seeming to be pulled from the depths of her chest. "Yes, Mom, just say it. I'm listening," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm while my heart hammered. She glanced toward the door, as if afraid someone might overhear. She raised a trembling finger and pointed to the space under her pillow, where a small, worn bank pouch was tucked away. I moved to get it, but she tugged my hand back and shook her head. She wanted me to understand this wasn't something to be rushed. I swallowed hard. A chill ran down my spine. Michael wasn't here, and my mother-in-law was looking at me with the gravity of someone passing on a sacred trust. "Michael, don't you trust him completely?" she said, her words broken, but clear enough to make me freeze. I was stunned. Before I could ask why, she began to gasp for air, her chest heaving. I frantically pressed the call button for the nurse, all while holding her hand and murmuring, "Mom, I'm here. I'm right here." The nurse and doctor rushed in. They spoke in hushed, professional tones. The doctor looked at me and said, "You should prepare yourself." Those words felt like a physical blow. I sat down, unable to cry, my throat feeling like it was filled with smoke. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside, the machine kept its steady rhythm, and in my heart, a great chasm had opened, not just from the fear of losing my mother-in-law, but from the knowledge that from this moment on, there were truths I could no longer afford to ignore. After the doctor spoke, my chest felt like it was in a vice. The old folks say there's a time for living and a time for dying, but who is ever truly ready when it arrives? I just nodded, my mouth too stiff to form words. The nurse pulled the curtain fully closed, telling me to give her some peace. They left, leaving the two of us under the pale fluorescent light. Carol's breathing was labored now, her eyes fluttering open and shut as if fighting to hold on. I leaned down, and though my voice shook, I tried to sound respectful. "Mom, if you have any last wishes, just tell me. I will listen." She raised her frail hand, the grip not as tight as before, but her fingertips still clung to me, like a drowning person holding onto a piece of straw. She darted a quick look at the door and forced her lips to move, open the pouch under the pillow. This time, she let me retrieve the small, worn canvas bank pouch. It was old, but the seams were strong, and it was zipped tight. I opened it. Inside, there was a sheaf of folded documents and a thick envelope. Before I could examine them, she coughed sharply, her eyes narrowing as if to warn me not to be hasty. "Listen to me first, before you look at those," she breathed. I nodded repeatedly. I had endured much in my life, but I had never felt so small. Sitting there, listening to a final testament that could change the fate of my son and me forever. Carol closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering her last reserves of strength. Then she opened them and looked directly at me. Her gaze was no longer that of a sick woman, but of a mother who had thought long and hard. "The land, 25 acres. I bought it a long time ago," she said slowly, each word a monumental effort. "It's right next to where the new highway is coming through. I've had an offer for $4 million. I heard the words and my world tilted. $4 million? I had never held more than a few $1,000s in my hand at one time. In all her years of running the store, of saving on every carton of milk and can of beans, I never imagined she could have amassed something of that value. I was so stunned I forgot to breathe. "Mom, did you say $4 million? I whispered, afraid that speaking any louder might shatter something fragile. Carol nodded slowly. Her lips trembled, but her voice held a new firmness. "It's for you and Leo." When I heard my son's name, my eyes began to sting. I looked at her hand, at her sunken face, and suddenly I understood. She wasn't talking about money. She was talking about a future. They say a legacy of blessing is worth more than wealth. She was trying to leave her grandson a blessing with every last ounce of her lucidity. I swallowed hard. "But, Mom." "What about Michael? He's your son. Why?" Carol immediately tightened her grip on my hand, her eyes widening with a clear warning. She forced her chin up, articulating each word as if hammering a nail. "Don't you let him know." A chill went down my spine. Those words were not just a request, they were a dire warning from someone who had seen something terrifying. I stammered, "Why can't Michael know? He's my husband, Leo's father." Carol gasped, a rattling sound in her throat. I quickly rubbed her back, but she shook her head, signaling that I needed to keep listening. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and pain, as if there was so much she wanted to say but couldn't form the words. "I had the papers all sorted out," she continued, her voice like broken pieces falling into place. "It's all been notarized at the county office. You can legally sell it. No one can challenge it." I opened the documents and quickly scanned them. I saw official seals, signatures, and names. I'm no legal expert, but I understood one thing. She had paved the way for me, paved it so thoroughly as if she feared I would be cornered with no way out. Carol closed her eyes, a tear forming at the corner. She said, almost inaudibly, "Child, in life, too much greed is a poison. I'm scared for him." I froze. I suddenly remembered Michael's calls over the past few years. His voice, always irritated. When I told him we were short on money for her medication, his only reply was, "Oh, okay." Once, I told him Leo missed him, but he snapped back, "Don't bother me with that." I had told myself it was just the stress of a man working far from home, but my mother-in-law's words now were like a sharp slap to my naivete. I wanted to ask what he had done, but I couldn't. I was afraid of an answer that might shatter my heart completely. Carol opened her eyes and looked at me pleadingly. "Emily, keep this safe for me, for my grandson. You're the only one I trust." The words, "you're the only one I trust," finally broke me. My hot tears fell onto the back of her hand. I quickly wiped them away, not wanting her to see me weak, but the more I wiped, the more they flowed. 8 years as a daughter-in-law, caring for her, for Leo, for the store, and for the house. I thought I was strong, but a person is only strong until their weakest point is struck. "You can count on me, Mom. I promise," I said, my voice thick with emotion, as if I were vowing to protect Leo, to honor her final wish. Carol slowly nodded. Her eyes seemed to soften, as if a great weight had been lifted. Then her brow furrowed, and her breathing became rapid. I panicked and hit the call button again. I heard footsteps, the door opening, and the doctor's commands. It all sounded like a dull roar in my ears. As they worked on her, Carol strained to turn her head toward me one last time. Her hand sought mine for a final connection. I grabbed it immediately and pressed it to my cheek. Her skin was as cold as morning dew. "Mom, I'm here. Don't be afraid," I said. But I was the one who was terrified. Carol looked at me. In her eyes, there was no more blame, no more anger. There was only something strange. The resolve of a person who knew she had chosen the right person to trust. Her lips parted as if to add one more thing, but no breath came. Suddenly, the rhythm of the machine beside the bed changed to a long, flat tone. The doctor said something I didn't hear. All I saw were Carol's fingers slowly releasing their grip on my hand, as light as a leaf falling onto a still lake. A moment of silence, and then something inside my chest collapsed. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at my hand which still held her coldness, as if holding a promise that never had a chance to warm up. Out in the hallway, they drew the curtain. Someone touched my shoulder and said, "I'm so sorry for your loss." I nodded in response. In my hand, the canvas pouch felt heavier than anything I had ever held. I picked up my phone. The screen was still dark, not a single missed call from Michael. I looked at Carol's face one last time. I suddenly remembered something she often said when she was strong. Water flows to the lowest ground. A person, to live, must know how to steer clear of trouble. That night, I finally understood. From now on, I could no longer live a simple, unassuming life. I had to learn to steer for my son and for myself. I don't remember how I handled the paperwork. All I know is that as we brought Mom's body back from the hospital, the rain was still falling, and the country road was as slick as if it had been greased. The hearse from the funeral home pulled up in front of our house. Neighbors came out, filling the yard. They all said the same things. Poor Carol. She was such a good woman. The words of sympathy felt like a passing breeze, because the only thing I could feel was the crushing weight in my chest. Mrs. Gable was waiting, holding Leo just inside the door. When he saw me, he ran and hugged my waist tightly, looking up and asking, "Mommy, where's Grandma?" I bent down and stroked his hair, biting my lip until it hurt. Grandma was very, very tired, sweetie. She's resting now. Leo blinked, not yet fully grasping what resting meant. He looked around, searching for Carol's presence like a glass that was always on the dinner table. I just held him, feeling a fishbone of grief lodged in my throat. As people began arranging chairs, setting up a table with photos, and preparing food for visitors, I slipped quietly into my room. I opened my old lockbox, placed the canvas pouch inside, and snapped it shut. My hands were shaking. I remembered my mother-in-law's warning, as clear as if she were whispering it beside me. A secret. The more valuable it is, the deeper it must be buried. A fire too close to straw will eventually ignite. I was afraid that one wrong move would turn everything to ash. The next morning, at exactly 9 o'clock, the first visitors for the viewing at the funeral home began to arrive. In the kitchen at home, a large pot of chili was simmering, the smell of onions filling the air, but no one had an appetite. A few relatives had come early to help cook, attend to guests, and manage the house. That's how it is in a small town. It's sad, but it's never disorganized. Everyone tries to do their part. I was dressed in black, standing near the entryway to greet people. The scent of lilies from the floral arrangements was overpowering, stinging my eyes. I looked at the photo of my mother-in-law on the memorial table. She was smiling, just like when she was healthy. Carol always used to say, "A good character is more important than a big name." Now, her name was on the lips of the whole town. Meanwhile, I stood there, aching and anxious about a different kind of noise that could arrive at any moment, the noise of a fight. The phone in my pocket vibrated. I pulled it out. It was just a short text from Michael, sent late last night. "I'm swamped." It was like a sad joke you see on the internet, a busy that absolved him of all responsibility. I didn't laugh. I just felt a coldness creep up my neck. Mrs. Gable came over and whispered, "You should call him again, Emily. It's his mother's funeral, and he's leaving you to handle this all alone." I looked at her and slowly shook my head. It wasn't that I didn't want to call, but that I couldn't. And even if I could, I wouldn't know what to say, now that a warning from the newly departed was echoing in my mind. Around 10 in the morning, when the funeral home was at its busiest, a minivan pulled up to the curb. Michael got out, wearing a black polo shirt, black slacks, and his hair neatly combed. At first glance, he looked presentable, but his eyes were darting around, not like someone who had come home to grieve, but like someone assessing what was left of an estate. He walked in, nodded briefly at the casket, and stood awkwardly for a moment. His hands weren't shaking, his shoulders didn't tremble. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was fulfilling a duty rather than saying goodbye to his mother. When he turned to the relatives, he spoke loudly. I was so far away, but the moment I heard the news, I rushed right back. "I'm such a terrible son." A few relatives nodded sympathetically. "It's okay, son. What matters is that you're here now." Someone even patted his shoulder in comfort. I stood a few feet away, watching, my heart filled with a bitter taste. I didn't need a performance. I just needed a moment of sincerity. Just one. When Michael saw me, he came over and pulled me by the sleeve, his voice low but urgent. "How are you holding up? Where's Leo?" I pointed toward Mrs. Gable, who was helping Leo say hello to some cousins. "He's over there." He nodded and then immediately asked the question, his tone quick and transparent. "Before Mom passed, did she say anything?" The question chilled me to the bone, not because of the words themselves, but because of the look in his eyes, the eyes of a prospector. I held my breath and answered calmly. Mom was very weak. The doctor had already told us to be prepared. It all happened so fast. Michael's brow furrowed. "No papers? Mom didn't give you anything?" She was always hiding things away. I looked him straight in the eye. For the first time in my life, I had to tell myself, "Stay calm," I answered curtly. "Let's just get through Mom's service first. We can talk about other things later. He gave a forced, dissatisfied smile but immediately turned back to mingling with the relatives. I overheard him telling a story about how hard life was in Texas, how he was always busy, always in meetings, words designed to make people pity him. In that moment, I understood what people meant by a wolf in sheep's clothing. It wasn't always obvious, but sometimes, the better someone is with words, the more you should fear them. At the reception back at the house, guests were eating, and the sound of silverware filled the room. I was busy serving people, offering drinks and napkins. An aunt pulled me aside and whispered, "Emily, how's Michael's job going? He said he's so busy he can barely come home." I forced a smile. "Yes, Auntie, it depends." After saying that, I quickly excused myself. I didn't want to add any words to embellish his image, but I also didn't want to tarnish it on the day of his mother's funeral. Respect for the deceased was important. I still needed to keep the peace for my mother-in-law. As evening approached, people gradually left. Michael went into the bedroom, looking around. His eyes lingered on the old dresser, then on the accounts for the store, as if he were appraising items for sale. He turned to me, his voice lowered. "Do we have any debts?" I replied, "The medical and hospital bills. I've listed them all." He nodded and said something that sounded casual but pierced my heart. "Good, so we can calculate everything. Now that Mom's gone, we need to sort it all out." I heard the word sort, but it sounded a lot like divide. I didn't say anything. I just quietly took Leo inside to change out of his formal clothes. The boy whispered, "Mom, Dad is home, so why am I not happy?" I froze and hugged him tightly. "Because Mommy misses Grandma. You miss her too, right?" Leo nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. That night, when only a few people remained and some relatives stayed to keep watch, I sat alone on the edge of the bed, listening to the wind whistle through the eaves. Michael was on the couch in the living room, the light from his phone glowing steadily as he texted nonstop. I didn't ask. I just stared at the ceiling and told myself, "Have faith, but be cautious." I had made a promise to my mother-in-law, and I would keep it. But I was beginning to feel something else creeping into our home. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't the rain, but greed. Looking back, it had been 8 years since I married into this family. But some memories feel like they happened just yesterday. When I first came here, I was only 20, and Michael was 24. Our wedding wasn't fancy, no limousine or grand hall. We just set up a large tent in the backyard, with rows of plastic tables, and the sound of a local country band echoed through the neighborhood. In a small town, a wedding is a community affair. Everyone pitches in, someone chops vegetables, someone washes dishes, someone serves the food. My own mother passed away when I was young, so my father walked me down the makeshift aisle that day, happy but nervous for me. I was nervous about what people always said, that being a daughter-in-law is hard. But Carol didn't scare me. She was a small, tanned woman, her hair always tied in a practical bun. She wasn't one for sweet words. She just looked me up and down, then led me into the kitchen and handed me a bowl of warm beef stew. "Eat up, child. You've been on your feet all day. Now that you're in your husband's house, we're family." I remember that stew, perfectly seasoned, rich and savory, the taste of home. That warmth calmed me more than 100 promises could have. Carol wasn't like the monster-in-laws from the movies. She was just a hardworking woman who ran a corner store, living a simple life. She opened the shop at dawn, closed it at dusk, and lit a candle for her late husband at night. On our first night, we didn't have a fancy bedroom. A corner of the house had been partitioned off for us, with a simple wooden bed and a quilt that was slightly faded. Michael scratched his head and smiled sheepishly. "This is all we have for now, okay? I'll save up, and we'll get a better place." I looked at him then and felt a surge of affection, a simple but earnest man. I said, "I'm not asking for a big house. I just need you to not let me down." Michael smiled and gently tapped my forehead. "They say when you love someone, you have to trust them. Here, trust me." Then he laughed, as if embarrassed by his own words. I laughed too. And in that moment, I felt the peace of youth, a belief that tomorrow's meal would be better than today's, as long as we worked hard together. In my first days as a daughter-in-law, I adjusted to the rhythm of the house. At 4:30 in the morning, Carol was already awake, boiling water for coffee and cleaning the store. I would still be sleepy, but she would knock gently on our door. "Emily, honey, time to get up. Come help me. Since you're new, I won't push you too hard, but it's better to learn now for the future." Her voice was a reminder, not a reprimand. I'd come out, still a bit clumsy. She taught me how to stack the cans so they wouldn't fall, how to arrange the chip bags so the labels faced forward, and how to use the old-fashioned scale for bulk candy. She taught by showing, not by shouting. One day, I dropped a whole carton of eggs, smashed eggs spread across the floor. I froze, my heart sinking to my stomach. I was sure I was going to get an earful, but Carol just sighed, bent down to pick up the broken shells, and said, "Well, it's broken. Just clean it up. People are more important than things, child. Don't you stand there crying over it." I was both ashamed and deeply touched. It was the first time I truly understood those words. Not everyone, especially those with little, has the patience to treat a loss as a small thing. Back then, Michael worked at a local construction site. When he came home in the afternoon, he would help me with the dishes and sweep the floor. Sometimes, while I was peeling potatoes, he'd bring over a bowl of water and say, "Let me do that." He'd even joke, "Modern men know their way around a kitchen, you know." I'd look at him. "You just make sure you stick to that." He'd grin. "Of course. We have to work together to get ahead." Our meals were simple. On rainy days, we had chili. In the summer, it was fried fish and a side of potato salad. Carol always gave me the biggest portion. I'd feel shy, but she'd say, "You're young. Eat up and get strong. It'll be even more important when I have a grandchild to chase around." I thought she was just joking, but eventually, it all came true. Carol had a routine. At the end of each day, she would sit at a small desk, open an old ledger, and write. If I glanced over, she would just smile and say, "Writing it down so I don't forget. Money, if you don't track it, just disappears." Then she would take the coins and bills from her apron, smooth them out, and put them in a cash box. She never bought new clothes or makeup for herself. If someone teased her for being thrifty, she would just say, "A small saving grows. We're not wealthy, so we have to prepare for a rainy day." Those words, "prepare for a rainy day," I only understand now, were not just about the rain from the sky, but also about the storms in a person's heart. In those first few years, I truly believed I was lucky. I wasn't rich, but I had a home, warm meals, laughter, and a mother-in-law who, in this small town, cherished her daughter-in-law. Every evening, I would sit outside, watching the yellow light from the store, listening to the cars pass by, and my heart was at peace. I thought this would be my life, slow, simple, but decent. There was only one thing I noticed. Sometimes, I would see Michael watching football with his friends. They would get loud, talking about point spreads and bets. When he saw me looking, he would just grin. "What are you thinking about? We're just having some fun." I believed him, because back then, he was still the man who came home on time, asked if his mother had taken her medicine, and carried his wife across a flooded street. I believed him, and I lived in that belief for a long time. But trust is like a porcelain cup. When it's whole, you think it's strong. Once it has a crack, you realize one wrong move can shatter it completely. When I was 21, I got pregnant. In a small town, having a baby is a big deal, not just for the couple but for the whole family. The day the pregnancy test came back positive, my heart was pounding like I had just run a race. I held the test in the bathroom, feeling a mix of joy and anxiety. Joy, because this was what everyone had been hoping for. Anxious, because I was still young, we were still struggling, and the store's income wasn't much. I walked out to the storefront. Michael was sitting there, handing a customer a 6-pack of soda. I placed the test on the counter and whispered, "Michael, I think I'm pregnant." He looked at it, and after 3 seconds, his eyes went wide. He let out a loud whoop that Carol heard from the back room. "What's going on out there? You sound like you won the lottery," she called out. Michael scratched his head. "Mom, Emily's pregnant." Carol stopped what she was doing, and her eyes suddenly glistened. She didn't hug me like they do in the movies. She just placed her hand on my shoulder and said, That's a blessing. Take care of yourself. 9 months is a long time. Don't you work too hard." Then she turned away, pretending to rearrange bottles of ketchup on a shelf. But I saw her quickly wipe her eyes. That tough woman, it turned out, had a soft spot for the idea of a grandchild. In the months that followed, the food in our house changed. Carol started making chicken soup, pot roast, and fish chowder, all things she said would be good for the baby. During my morning sickness, the smell of frying bacon would make me nauseous. She never got annoyed. She would just quietly boil some water with ginger and say, "Drink this, child. Life is like a cup, sometimes hot, sometimes cold. A pregnancy is the same. It will pass." Her folk wisdom was both amusing and comforting. She didn't have much formal education, but every word she spoke had weight. Leo was born one morning at the end of a rainy spring. The sky was dark, and the wind was howling. My contractions were intense. Michael was in a panic, running around to get the car started, sweating but trying to keep me calm. "You can do this. I'm right here." In the delivery room, I heard myself panting, the doctor saying, "One more push," and then a loud, healthy cry echoed a beautiful sound. The baby was red and wrinkly, but to me, he was my entire world. Carol held her grandson, smiling through her tears. She proudly told everyone in the neighborhood, "My grandson. We'll name him Leo, so he'll be strong like a lion." Michael stood by, looking at his son, then at me. "Thank you, Emily. You went through so much." Those words, when I recall them now, are both warm and heartbreaking, because some words of gratitude can't save a life when a person's heart has already changed. The first few months with our son were hectic but happy. When Leo cried at night, I would rock him. Carol would turn on a small lamp to help me prepare a bottle. Sometimes, I was so tired I would fall asleep instantly. She would cover me with a blanket and whisper, "Get some sleep, child. You need your strength for tomorrow." I would hear her and feel tears well up. They say the relationship between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law is difficult, but back then, I felt like I had gained a second mother. The convenience store was open every day. When Leo was a bit older, I would put him in a baby carrier on my chest while I worked the register. The regular customers would tease me. "Carol's daughter-in-law is so hardworking, running the store and raising a baby at the same time." Carol would just smile. "That's not just hard work, it's dedication. If we don't move, how will we eat?" She started teaching me how to keep the ledger more formally. It was no longer just Mrs. Smith, $20. I had to write the date, the items purchased, and the expected payment date. She said, "Even for small amounts, things must be clear. A $1 mistake can lead to a $1,000 problem." I nodded, learning to do inventory and balance the books. Sometimes I'd make a mistake, but she never yelled. She would just point to the error in the ledger. "Look again. In everything, be careful. A small oversight can cause a big problem." It was around this time I noticed another of Carol's habits. Whenever she had extra cash, even just a few dollars, she would fold it neatly and put it in an envelope. That envelope wasn't kept in the cash register or the dresser. She hid it in a secret place. If I asked, she would just say, "Something to fall back on when we need it." Her tone was light, but the underlying message was firm. There were some afternoons when there were no customers. Carol would change her clothes, fix her hair, and say, "I'm just heading to the county courthouse. You watch the store for a bit." I was busy getting Leo down for a nap, so I'd just reply, "Okay, Mom." Why wouldn't I? In a small town, people go to the courthouse for all sorts of business. I didn't think much of it, but one time, Mrs. Gable came by to buy some milk and said, "I saw your mother-in-law talking with Mr. Santos from the assessor's office. Was she at the courthouse?" I was a bit surprised. "Oh, yes. I think she had some business to take care of." "Mrs." Gable raised an eyebrow. "Ah, just mentioning it. Wealth is like smoke. Lucky is the one who knows how to hold on to it." I forced a smile, a slight unease in my chest, but I told myself it was normal for a mother to think ahead. We were poor, so it was natural for her to be cautious with money. Back then, all I thought about was formula and diapers for Leo and how to keep the shelves stocked. I didn't pry, because in our culture, A daughter-in-law who is too curious about her mother-in-law's affairs is considered nosy. In the following years, Leo grew. He's 7 now, but back then, he was just learning to crawl and call out dada with a lisp. Every time he said it, Carol would smile and say, "One more time, and Grandma will give you a cookie." Then she would turn to me and remind me, raising a child, Emily, takes both love and discipline. Love includes correction, but it must be done with understanding. I would listen and take her words to heart. My life back then, though busy and tight on money, was happy. Happy because of my son's laughter, my mother-in-law's support, and a husband who, at least, still came home every night, held his son, and smiled at his wife. I didn't know that in those days I thought were so peaceful, my mother-in-law was quietly preparing a life raft for my son and me, and I was living through the last days of that tranquility, completely unaware. It was a morning at the start of summer. Not hot yet, but the air was humid. I woke up early to make oatmeal for Leo, with a hard-boiled egg on the side. The boy always said, "Mom's oatmeal makes me feel awake." I laughed, and made a mental note to buy him an ice cream cone later. Carol was still strong then, just complaining of a slight headache from the changing weather. She refused to see a doctor. "It's just a headache, it'll pass." She was standing in the store, arranging bottles of ketchup while doing some calculations in her head. I looked at her and felt a sense of peace. Just like always. Around 7 o'clock, the morning rush began. People buying coffee, others getting a pack of cigarettes on credit. That's how it was in our town, a close-knit community where tabs were settled at the end of the month. As Carol was weighing out some bulk goods for a customer, she suddenly paused. I saw her hand begin to tremble. I thought she was just tired, so I said, "Why don't you go rest, Mom? I can handle this." Before she could answer, her face went pale, and one side of her mouth drooped slightly. She clutched her head, her eyes wide with panic, and then she collapsed. Her body hit the side of a metal shelf, and I heard a loud, sickening thud. I screamed, "Mom!" and ran to catch her. The customers panicked too. Someone ran to call 911. Carol couldn't speak. She was just making guttural sounds, and drool was trickling from the corner of her mouth. My knees went weak. "Mom, can you hear me?" Mrs. Gable, who lived right next door, rushed in and yelled, "Don't shake her. Turn her on her side. Elevate her head." She sounded like she knew what she was doing, and I followed her instructions, my heart feeling like it was going to burst out of my chest. Leo, who had been about to leave for school, heard the commotion and ran back. He froze at the door, his face as white as a sheet. I told him, "Leo, stay right there. Don't come any closer." The boy bit his lip, his eyes turning red, but he obeyed. A neighbor helped us get Carol into his pickup truck to rush her to the local clinic, and from there, she was taken by ambulance to the county hospital. In the truck, I held her, listening to her ragged breathing. Mrs. Gable was in the back with Leo. "Your grandma is going to be okay, honey," but her own voice was shaking. At the hospital, they rushed Mom into the emergency room. I stood outside, my hands smelling of antiseptic, my mind a complete blank. Michael. I called him again and again. The first call, no answer. The second, he picked up angrily. "What is it?" "I'm working," I quickly explained, my throat feeling raw. "Mom had a stroke. We're at the county hospital. Can you come home?" There was a silence on the other end, then a heavy sigh. "A stroke? Okay, I'll see what I can do." The words "I'll see what I can do" sent a chill through me. His mother was in the emergency room, but his response sounded like he was calculating the cost. I hung up the phone, biting my lip until I tasted blood. A thought crossed my mind. In times of crisis, you find out who people really are. I didn't know everything yet, but I was starting to see a dark shadow. The doctor said Carol had survived, but there were complications, and she would need extensive monitoring and therapy. I wanted to collapse with a mixture of relief and fear. Relief that she was alive. Fear because I knew everything was about to change. When they finally let me see her, I found her lying there, her eyes open, but vacant. One side of her body was almost completely immobile. She looked at me, a look of despair that pierced my heart. The days that followed were a nightmare. In the morning, I took Leo to school. In the afternoon, I went to the hospital. In the evening, I tried to manage the store, then went back to clean Mom up, give her medicine, and feed her porridge. Carol had always been a very private, clean person. Now, when I had to change her adult diaper, she would get frustrated not with anger, but with shame. Sometimes, she would try to hide her face as I helped her, tears in her eyes. I would force myself to say, "Mom, don't think like that. I'm your daughter-in-law, but I'm like your own daughter too." She would blink, and a tear would roll onto the pillow. The hospital bills, medication costs, and gas money were like a bucket with a hole in it that could never be filled. Because I was running back and forth, I was neglecting the store. I started extending more credit to customers, my heart burning with the fear that I wouldn't be able to cover our expenses. Michael came home 3 days later. He walked into the hospital room, looked at his mother, then looked at me. He didn't cry. He just asked a question that sounded like a calculation. "What did the doctor say? Is it going to be expensive?" I was stunned. I wanted to ask if he loved his mother, but I swallowed the words. "Mom needs long-term therapy. And a lot of medication." His brow furrowed. "In that case, I'll need to find a better-paying job." That night, I overheard him on the phone with someone, talking about leaving, about going to work on an oil rig in Texas. I lay on the cot next to Mom's bed, staring at the white ceiling tiles, my heart feeling hollow with exhaustion. They say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes it's the water that keeps you afloat. Mrs. Gable was the one looking after Leo, sometimes bringing over a container of homemade stew. "You need to eat to keep your strength up. Don't you give up." After a week, they discharged Carol. I set up a hospital bed in the living room for her, bought a commode and a shower chair. Every day, I massaged her hands and feet. She would try to move her fingers, wincing in pain. "You can do it, Mom. Just takes patience," she would nod. At the same time, Michael began to change. He was often irritated by the mess in the house, the slow sales at the store, and my inability to generate more money. He became quiet, and when he did speak, it felt like the love was draining out of his words. I was exhausted, but I tried to keep the peace at home. With Mom sick and Leo still so young, I couldn't afford to break down. But from the moment Mom collapsed, I felt something else collapsing in our home. The peace I had once thought was so solid. And I, without even a chance to catch my breath, had to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. The first time Michael brought up going to Texas was during a power outage one evening. The whole neighborhood was dark. Mom was lying in her bed, and as I fanned her, I could hear her heavy breathing. Leo was sitting next to me, doing his homework by candlelight. "Mommy, is Grandma going to get all better?" Before I could answer, Michael spoke from the shadows. "I have to leave." His eyes were fixed on the dark yard outside. "How much are we really making here? Mom's medicine, Leo's school fees. How are we ever going to get ahead if we just stay here?" I lowered the fan. "Where are you going?" "Texas," he answered curtly. "A buddy of mine got me a job on an oil rig. The pay is great. I can send money back regularly." The words, "send money back regularly," stung my heart. I looked at Mom. Her eyes were open. I was sure she had heard everything. She didn't speak. I knew she wouldn't want to hold her son back. In a small town, a man leaving for a better job is seen as a step up. But whether it was his life or his heart that would change, no one knew. I whispered, "Mom is weak. Who will take care of her?" Michael shrugged. "You will. Who else? You're her daughter-in-law, aren't you?" The words were casual but sharp as a knife. I bit my lip. I wanted to say that I was also his wife, the mother of his child, but I swallowed it. I didn't want to start a fight while Mom was lying right there. Suddenly, Mom stirred. She clutched the blanket and looked at Michael for a long time. Then she said hoarsely, "If you go, you remember, your mother is still alive. Don't you dare neglect your wife and son." "I won't," Michael replied, avoiding his mother's gaze. I felt a sense of dread, like looking at a glass of water that seems calm but will ripple with the slightest breeze. In the days before he left, Michael was busy. He was always on the phone with someone and digging through old paperwork. I asked what kind of job he would be doing, but his only reply was, "I'll know when I get there." "Stop asking so many questions. You're stressing me out." I stopped asking. How can you find common ground when one person keeps closing the door? I packed his bags, his clothes, and some toiletries. The night before he left, I cooked a nice dinner. After Leo ate, he hugged his father. Daddy, are you coming back? Michael stroked his head. Daddy's leaving to earn money to buy you a new bike. Leo's eyes lit up. Did you hear that, Mommy? Daddy's going to buy me a bike. I forced a smile. A bicycle was worthless compared to the words, I'll stay by your side. But Michael didn't say that. The next morning, I woke up early to cook. I helped Mom sit up. She looked at me. Mom, is there anything you want to tell him? She whispered. Take care of the house. Don't let anyone look down on us. Then she turned to Michael. Work honestly. Don't be greedy. Michael picked up his duffel bag. I handed him an envelope with some cash for the trip. He took it and stuffed it in his pocket. I'm leaving. Take care of Mom. Don't forget her medicine. He gave Leo a quick kiss. We walked him outside. The bus was waiting at the corner. Michael got on and waved. I'll call, he shouted for everyone to hear. I nodded, not wanting to believe it completely, but needing to. Sometimes, a small-town woman just has to cling to promises. Leo ran after the bus for a few steps. Daddy, come home soon, okay? Michael smiled, and the bus door closed. It pulled away, leaving a cloud of dust and noise. I just stood there, not out of sadness, but because the house behind me suddenly felt vast and empty. I went inside and heard Mom cough. Leo held my hand. Mommy, let's give Grandma her medicine. Okay, I said. As long as we still loved each other, we could get through anything. But that afternoon, I called Michael to see if he had arrived safely. The message said, The subscriber you have dialed is not in service. I called again. Same thing. It was late that night when he finally texted, Made it. Nothing more. I put my phone down, watching the simmering pot of soup on the stove. The flame was bright, but my heart was slowly growing cold. Suddenly, Mom called out, Emily. I ran to her side. She took my hand and said, In life, don't believe in words, believe in actions. I couldn't answer. I just tightened my grip on her hand. Outside, the wind howled. I felt that I was beginning a new chapter of my life, a chapter where I had to be a daughter-in-law, a mother, and my own pillar of support. In the first month Michael was gone, I still had a little hope in my heart. He would call at night, and I could hear the noise of other men in the background. He said he was sharing a small trailer with some coworkers. He would ask how Mom and Leo were. I was happy, like a thirsty person getting a sip of water. Mom can move her fingers now, and Leo isn't crying at school anymore, I'd report. Good, he'd say, and then hang up because someone was calling for him. Even though the calls were short, I told myself it was normal for him to be busy. At the end of the month, he sent $2,000. For people in the city, that might not be much, but for me then, it was a lifesaver. I bought medicine and good fish for Mom. As I massaged her limbs, I told her, We have money for your medicine now, Mom. She didn't smile, just sighed. That was her way, never showing too much emotion, as if afraid the happiness might vanish too quickly. As for Leo, every time the phone rang, he would run to it. Is that Daddy, Mom? Once, Michael video called. Leo showed him his homework and the new gap where he'd lost a tooth. Michael smiled, praised him, and then said he was busy and had to go. Leo was still smiling, but I was staring at the dark screen, my heart feeling like an empty glass. In the following months, he continued to send money, but the amount got smaller and smaller. From $2,000, it became $1,000, $500, then $1,000. His reason was that they were deducting a lot from his paycheck for various fees. I believed him, because a daughter-in-law from a small town is used to enduring and waiting. I focused my attention on the store. Every day, I counted every penny. Sometimes, when too many people asked for credit, I would just say, Okay, I'll put it on your tab. Just try to pay me by the end of the week. Afterward, my heart would ache. The list of debts was growing longer, but the pharmacy bills wouldn't wait. Carol saw me struggling. One day, she said, Don't try to carry it all yourself, child. You'll break. I forced a smile. If I don't carry it, who will? She was silent for a moment, then spoke. In life, There's joy and there's hardship. The scary thing is people who only want the joy but none of the hardship. I pretended not to understand who she was referring to. By the 8th month, Michael's calls became rare. Once a week, then once every 2 weeks. I would text, "How are you?" His reply, "Okay." I'd text, "Mom misses you." His reply, "A read receipt." It was strange. He wasn't angry, but you felt like you were shrinking, like you were holding onto a rope while the other person was slowly letting go. One day, Leo was doing his homework and suddenly asked, "Mom, why doesn't Dad call anymore?" I was taken aback. "He's busy, sweetie." Leo frowned. "Busy, but he doesn't remember us?" A child's question is as sharp as a needle. I turned away so he wouldn't see the look in my eyes. Just then, Mrs. Gable came over. She saw my face and asked, "Is he still sending money?" I nodded. She gave a sad smile. "Even if he sends money, if the heart is gone, it's just as hard." All I could say was, "I know." And then the day I had been dreading arrived. A call in the middle of the night. I had just fallen asleep. I saw Michael's name. I was surprised. When I answered, I was met with his angry voice. "What are you doing that the electric and water bills are so high?" "What? I send money, and you spend it like that? Why is it never enough?" I sat up, trying to keep my voice down. "Mom's medicine," the doctor added vitamins. "Leo's school fees. It's all written down." "Written down? You're full of excuses. I'm working myself to death out here. And you, just watching a store, can't even make it stretch?" Those words hit me like a slap. I remembered the nights I sat up with Mom, the days I ran the store with Leo on my hip, the sweat on my back, and now I was being treated like a freeloader. "I'm not full of excuses," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm just taking care of our mother and our son. Just stop calling so often. I need some peace to work." I froze. He needed peace to work. His wife and son. What did we need to live? Before I could answer, he hung up. In the dark house, I could hear my own heart beating. If you were here, my friends, I would just ask, if you were Emily, what would you do? I put the phone down, my hands cold. I looked toward Mom's room. I knew she was awake. She didn't ask, but I heard her sigh. I covered her with her blanket. Leo, in his sleep, mumbled, "Daddy." I hugged him. They say if a man loves his child, he loves the mother too. If that's true, then if he's growing numb to the wife, does he still love the child? I couldn't sleep. I didn't cry, but it felt like the warmth was being leached from my heart. I still had a store to open, a mother to care for, a son to raise, but I was beginning to understand. The problem wasn't just money. The problem was when the person you relied on starts to see you as a burden. The next morning, I woke up even earlier. The words, "Stop calling so often," echoed in my mind. I cleaned the store, but my hands were trembling. I took care of Mom. Before Leo left for school, he hugged me. "Mommy, were you sad yesterday?" I forced a smile. "Just a little, sweetie." As I opened the store, the phone rang. It was Michael. "Hello?" I said. "Send me $3,000. Right now." I thought I had misheard. "What for?" "A friend of mine is in a bind. If I can't help him out, I'll lose face." His voice was a command. I looked around the nearly empty store. $3,000 was a month's worth of medicine, groceries, and school supplies. "Michael, we're already short." "I know that. Your money is for the house. Mine is for business. If I lose face, we all starve." His words were a threat. "Give me until this afternoon. I'll find a way." "Now," he said. "I need it now." And he hung up. I stood there, frozen. The cash box was empty. I started borrowing from neighbors. I was so ashamed. Some gave, some promised. When I finally gathered the $3,000, I wired it to him immediately. His text back, "Okay." It felt like I had thrown money into a bottomless well. I thought it was over. 3 days later, Michael called again. "Send me $20,000. I nearly dropped the phone. "Where am I supposed to get that?" "I have a business opportunity. If you don't help me, I'll lose it." "What business?" "Just do it. Don't get in my way." A cold dread filled me. I went into Mom's room. She was awake. "Is he asking for money again?" she asked. I nodded. She closed her eyes, a tear rolling down her cheek. He's my son, but I can't stop him. I'll handle it, Mom. She shook her head. How much longer can you handle it? I started borrowing from acquaintances, signing promissory notes with interest. My hand shook as I signed. After I sent the money, Michael texted, "Don't lecture me." When Leo came home from school, he asked, "Did Dad ask for money again?" I was shocked. "How did you know?" "I heard you. Why doesn't he send us money?" I was speechless. How could I answer without shattering his image of his father? Dad is having a hard time right now. That evening, Mrs. Gable told me, "Emily, a man who is always asking for money has a problem. That's not business. I'm scared too, but I don't have any proof." Then start collecting it. Texts, call logs, save everything. You're going to need it. It was the first time I had thought of it. I opened my phone. For the first time, I didn't delete the messages. I started taking screenshots, noting the dates and times. At night, while Leo slept, I realized I couldn't afford to be naive anymore. I had to be smart not to fight, but to survive. For my mother-in-law, for my son, and for myself. From that day on, I lived as if walking a tightrope. By day, I ran the store. But in my mind, there was always a knot of anxiety. And sure enough, it wasn't long before Michael called again. "Send me 100 à halvtreds, null." It felt like a bucket of ice water had been dumped on me. "Michael, where would I get that kind of money? All you do is complain. You act like you're the only one in the world with problems. Don't you even see me as your wife anymore? If you can send it, do it. If you can't, get out of my way. People are after me. Do you understand?" "Who?" "None of your business. If you can't do it, then fine." And he hung up. I stood there, my heart hammering. "Who was that, Mommy?" Leo asked. "Just a customer, sweetie." I lied. That afternoon, a customer got angry when I asked him to pay his tab. "I don't have the money. If you don't want to give credit, just close your damn store. Who told you to take care of your sick mother-in-law anyway?" I was stunned into silence. I wanted to say it was my duty, but it would have just led to a fight. That night, Michael texted, "I'm coming home tomorrow." I didn't know what for, but I knew it wasn't for love. I went into Mom's room. She saw the look on my face. "How much?" she asked. I told her the amount. She closed her eyes, crying. "It's my fault," I told him. "Don't say that, Mom. When he comes home, don't fight with him. Be calm, but be firm. I don't want you and Leo to get dragged into this." That night, Leo heard me crying. "Mommy, if Daddy yells at you, I'll stand next to you." I hugged him. I didn't want him to experience that, but I understood. He was growing up too fast because of adult problems. I opened my phone, organizing the evidence. In Mom's room, she coughed. She took my hand. "Emily, there are times you have to endure, and there are times you can't. The tree wants to be still, but the wind won't stop. Do you understand?" I nodded. I saw a resolve in her eyes. It was as if she had already decided on a course of action to protect us. The next morning, while I was at the store, I heard a sound from Mom's room. I rushed in. She was lying there, pale, struggling to breathe. "Mom!" I panicked. "Mrs. Gable came running. Call an ambulance." Leo froze. "Grandma is going to the hospital, sweetie. You wait here with Mrs. Gable." At the hospital, I called Michael. No answer. The hospital asked for a deposit. I had no money. It was Mrs. Gable who paid it. Don't be embarrassed. What's important is Carol. It was then that I felt the saying, "A husband is your rock," was a luxury. My rock was my neighbor. The doctor said, "You should prepare yourself." It was the second time I had heard those words, but they still hurt just as much. When Mom regained consciousness, she whispered, "Leo? He's safe and sound, Mom." She looked at my purse. I understood. I took out the documents she had given me. "Emily," she said, "remember what I told you. Don't you let him know." "I won't, Mom. I promise. Don't sign anything. Don't listen to strangers." "I won't. Forgive me for having a son like him." "It's not your fault, Mom." That night, Michael called. "Mom is in the hospital," I said. "How is she?" "It's serious. You need to come home." "Tomorrow," he said. The next day, Michael arrived. His first question was, "Are there any papers?" I was stunned. His mother was on her deathbed, and all he could think about was papers. Before I could answer, Carol looked at him and whispered, "Don't be greedy." Michael's phone rang. He stepped outside. I overheard him. "Yeah, I'm home. I'll check. Don't rush me." A voice on the other end. "If you don't sort this out, we're all in trouble." A chill ran through me. That was not the voice of a relative. That afternoon, Carol passed away. Quietly. Her hand in mine suddenly felt weightless. Michael glanced at her for a moment, then turned away. I quietly slipped off my wedding ring and put it in my pocket. 3 days after the funeral, Michael confronted me. "We need to talk about the house. We're still in mourning. We're selling the house and the store. Where will we live? I need the money. Remember, you're just the daughter-in-law. This house belonged to my mother." The words "just the daughter-in-law" felt like being thrown to the ground. "I am also your wife, Leo's mother. I took care of your mother for 8 years. I'm not signing anything. You took care of her because you were living here for free. Don't get any ideas." I quietly turned on the voice recorder in my pocket. "If you want to sell, be clear. Who is the buyer? Whose name is it under? Someone is coming tomorrow. Don't you get in the way." The next day, he arrived with a man named Rico. They wanted me to sign papers. I refused. "I need a witness." Afraid of what the neighbors would say, he called Mr. Henderson, a respected elder from our town. "Why are you selling?" Mr. Henderson asked. "I need the money," Michael said. "What about your wife and son? They'll figure it out." I spoke up. "He is forcing me to sell the house, while he has been borrowing money from me. I have evidence." Mr. Henderson said, "You can't force your wife. You have to ensure their welfare." Michael got angry and stormed out. Mrs. Gable told me, "From now on, be careful. He's shown his true colors." That night, I heard Michael on the phone. "Yes, I'll sort it out tomorrow. Don't rush me." A voice replied, "If there's no signature, this gets difficult." The next day, I told him something I had been thinking about for a long time. "Let's get a divorce." He laughed. "Who do you think you're scaring? How will you survive without me?" "I'm not scaring you. These are my terms. I will agree to sell the house, but you sign the divorce papers. I get full custody of Leo. And from the sale of the house, I will take 2/10 of the proceeds for me and Leo. The rest is yours." He paused, thinking. The glint in his eyes was that of a man doing a calculation. "Only 2/10? Fine." The process began. I took all the evidence texts, voice recordings, lists of his debts to Sheriff Reyes. I told him everything. "Don't face this alone," he said. "If you feel threatened, you call immediately." When Michael signed the divorce papers, his only question was, "When can we sell?" On the day of the sale, at the lawyer's office, I was calm. Michael was fidgety. The moment the money was transferred to his account, he stood up. "I'm leaving. You're not even going to say goodbye to Leo? What for? He's your problem now." He walked out, already on the phone. "I got the money. Meet me at the usual place." I sent a text to Sheriff Reyes. "Target has left, heading for the bus terminal." At the terminal, I watched him from a distance. Before he could get on the bus, 3 plainclothes officers approached him. He tried to run, but he didn't get far. "They apprehended him," he shouted. "What are you doing?" Then he saw me. "Emily, you reported me, you traitor." I walked closer. "I didn't report you. You reported yourself." "You tricked me." "You forced me to sign. We divorced because you chose money over us. Do you remember the last thing Mom said to you? Don't be greedy." He froze. They put him in the car. The loud slam of the door was the end of 8 years of my life. A week later, Sheriff Reyes called me. Michael passed away. I was stunned. What? He had a long-standing drug problem. When he was arrested, his body couldn't handle the withdrawal. He died in his cell. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just felt a vast, empty space. Bad deeds have consequences, but when they happen, it's not like in the movies. It's just a sad, quiet end. At Michael's sparsely attended funeral, Leo asked me, "Did Daddy love me?" "He did, sweetie, a long time ago. But a sickness pulled him away. A strong person is someone who knows when to stop. After everything, I handled the inheritance Mom left me. The land. I sold it legally. $4 million. I didn't celebrate. I was scared. We left our small town, not because I hated it, but because we needed peace. We moved to the coast in Oregon. I didn't buy a big mansion. I bought a modest piece of property and had a small fourplex built for rentals, a small business that would give us enough to live on. In our new home, Leo asked, "Mommy, is anyone going to bother us here?" I hugged him. "No one, sweetie. From now on, we're going to live in peace." I set up a small memorial shelf for Carol with her picture. I lit a candle. I didn't ask for wealth. I just asked that my son could finally sleep soundly through the night. Our life now is simple. In the morning, I hear the tenants moving about, the sound of the ocean in the distance. I run a small online shop, selling handmade crafts. Leo is in school, playing with friends. Sometimes, he asks about his grandma. I tell him stories of how much Carol loved him. Every night, as I listen to the wind, I remember those 8 years. Life is like the ocean, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy. But after it all, I understand. Peace isn't free. It's the fruit of being smart, of having the courage to walk away, and of asking for help when you need it. The lesson I learned: love must have boundaries, endurance must have its limits, and money should never, ever be traded for dignity. If you learned something from this story, please leave a like. Thank you for listening. Until next time.